Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, Open University.
In our study of Indian writing in English, we are looking at poetry. Remember, we are with Block 2. We're looking at the units. We've already looked at one of the units, which was Torudat. Now we move on to the next poet, Derozio, as he's called. Henry Louis Vivian Derozio, 1809 to 1831. Sad indeed that the poets of this period died quite early. Times were different. Medical facilities were probably fewer. And so, like Torudat and her brother and sister, Derozio also died quite young. Derozio was half Portuguese. One of his parents was Portuguese and the other was Indian. He was a poet, a teacher, and a rationalist thinker. He was Eurasian. You can understand that, right? Nowadays, so much of fusion we talk about. But half Europe, half Asian. As I've already told you, one parent was Portuguese and one parent was Indian. He was actually a teacher and he taught in Hindu College, Calcutta. There was this feeling that he spoke a lot about in many of his views, in many of his arguments, in many of the discussions that he had with his students. He seemed to be anti-Hindu. I want us to remember that in a sense, it's going to be a little later that what we refer to as the Indian Renaissance. European Renaissance, remember, is the 14th and 15th century. But when we look at India, we refer to the period usually after 1850, when Derozio was already dead. We refer to that period as Indian Renaissance. And some of you would remember, should remember. If you don't, you should go back to your history books and look at names like Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, and many more of them. And remember, what were they doing? They were trying to rid Indian society of many of our false beliefs, maybe traditions which were not really good. And I'm looking at things like sati, for example. How the abolition of sati, Raja Ram Mohan Roy played a very important role. I'm thinking of Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, who did so much for women's education. I'm thinking of the efforts that these great thinkers of the period put towards widow remarriage. Remember, otherwise we had cities in our country, which we probably still have, sadly, where widows still go to spend the latter part of their lives. I'm thinking of maybe Vrindavan and I'm thinking of Benares, where you still have those areas where you have so many of these widows. Anyway, but I'm talking about the Indian Renaissance. So when Derozio was teaching and when he was talking to his students, there was this feeling that he was anti-Hindu. A claim which his critics used in order to have him dismissed from Hindu College. And there was this anxiety in traditional Hindu society that he could be a danger to the younger generation because he was poisoning their minds. I don't want to go into the politics of that period because at the same time, I'm amazed, I'm intrigued by the fact that his poems generally talk about the glory of India, the past glory of India. He bemoans the fact that India is not as great as it was once. And for that, he blames the colonizer. So I'm not very sure how these accusations were leveled, but they were leveled and they resulted in his being dismissed from the teaching position at Hindu College. Some of his important poems are The Harp of India, The Fakir of Janghira, A Walk by Moonlight, etc. We are going to look at another poem, a different poem, but I will talk about it very soon. So this was Henry Louis Vivian Derozio, 1809 to 1831, one of the important early poets, Indian poets, writing in English. So the first poem that we have, I told you, they show a lot of patriotism. The first poem that we have, To India, My Native Land. My country, so he's directly addressing his country. It's a monologue. You understand a monologue where there's one speaker. My country, in thy days of glory past, a beauteous halo circled round thy brow, and worshipped as a deity thou wast. Where is thy glory? Where the reverence now? Thy eagle pinion is chained down at last, and grovelling in the lowly dust art thou. Thy minstrel hath no wreath to weave for thee, save the sad story of thy misery. He's sad, very sad at the condition of his country now. I don't need to remind you about how it was during the days of Jahangir, the Mughal ruler, that the first Englishmen, the first Europeans came to India basically to trade. Remember, the spices and silks of India had already made a big name in Europe. So they came as traders, and then we know what happened. We know the story of the East India Company, and then we know of how the crown took over after the First War of Independence of 1857. But I'm not talking about all that here, and this poem was written even before that. But what I'm trying to tell you is, Derozio looked at the condition of India today. Today, I'm talking about the early 19th century. And what does he say? My country, in thy days of glory past, a beauteous halo circled round thy brow, and worshipped as a deity thou wast. You know the halo, that light here, which you see maybe around deities, you know, images of our deities. You probably see them in calendars and paintings, that special light which shows that you are different, you are superhuman, you know, you're a god, Devta. In thy days of glory past, so you had a glorious past, a beauteous halo circled round thy brow, and worshipped as a deity thou wast. The idea of Bharat Mata was going to come later, but you worshipped your country. The motherland, as we talk about. You know, very few people, very few countries in the world, I think Italy, Germany, etc., speak of fatherland. Otherwise, most countries refer to their country as motherland. You were worshipped as a deity. Where is thy glory? Where is it gone? Where is the halo? Where is that ability for us to worship you? Where the reverence now? Why are we not respecting you anymore? And he himself answers that question by saying, thy eagle pinion is chained down at last, and grovelling in the lowly dust art thou. You've been laid low. From that hallowed position, you are now groveling in the lowly dust. What the colonizer, what the ruler has done to us, has crushed our spirit, has crushed our confidence in ourselves. That's what has happened. And therefore, if I, as a poet, want to write about you today, what can I write? The minstrel hath no wreath to weave for thee, save the sad story of thy misery. If I want to write about you, my country, you are no more revered like a deity. There is no halo round your brow. What can I do? I can only write the sad story of thy misery. And I'm sure you've read many poems about this. Even Tagore's Where the Mind is Without Fear, right? And the head is held high. This is his hope. This is his prayer for the future. Into that country, into that land, right? He wants us to wake up. And that is about the future. That's not about the present. So Derozio is telling us in what a terrible state my country is. And that is why if I have to write a poem today, it can only be a poem which tells a sad story of thy misery. Well, I don't want to talk about that. And therefore, let me dive into the depths of time and bring from the ages that have rolled, a few small fragments of those wrecks sublime, which human eye may never more behold, and let the guerdon of my labor be my fallen country, one kind wish for thee. What a beautiful way of saying the present is terrible. So I don't want to write about the present, he says. What do I want to do? Let me go into the past. Let me dive deep into the depths of time. Remember when you had the halo, when you were revered as a deity? Let me go there and bring out from the past a few small fragments of those wrecks sublime. You would not have grandparents who lived, right? Even your grandparents may, or your parents certainly, and your grandparents too, may be born in independent India. But if you're looking at a little older, right, great-grandparents, or your parents may tell you about what their great-grandparents told them, what their grandparents told them about the kind of life that they led. The kind of, we didn't have slavery, maybe, but almost slavery. Remember where you said clubs, entrance to clubs, or the first class in railways, railway carriages said, dogs and Indians not allowed. That was the kind of life we led. So I don't want to talk about that. Derozio says, let me go and pick up from the past a few fragments. Can I talk about Nalanda and Takshashila? Maybe. Can I talk about the greatness of, right, the empire of those kings who ruled? Maybe of Ashoka, maybe of Chandragupta Maurya, maybe of the Mughals, maybe of Rana Pratap, maybe of Rajendra Chola. I could go on and on. Maybe of Krishnadevaraya, maybe of Kanishka. Remember, all this was a part of that great Indian subcontinent. Let me look there and let me get what the human eye cannot behold. Let me get there. And I need some reward. I need a prize. I need a guerdon for all the labor. What should it be? One kind wish for thee. Oh, my dear country, my native country. Hopefully, remember, we are still 100 years before independence when this poem was written. But let me hope that I have one kind wish for thee. That, my native country, may you once again get the glory that you once had. May you once again be worshipped as a deity. This is Derozio's prayer for my native country, to India, my native country. And therefore I'm saddened when we talk about his being anti-Hindu is what he was criticized for, not being anti-Indian, right? So I think it's a beautiful patriotic poem which is written in a monologue form, a very simple poem. Once you know the background, I think you can read and appreciate it. We have one more poem for you by Derozio, which I'll talk about now, which reminds me to a great extent of P.B. Shelley's West Wind. I think you should go back and read that poem. I wish. What could I be if I were this, if I were that? Shelley goes on and on. If I were a leaf, you would take me. In many ways, this poem reminds me of Shelley's poem. It would be a little unfair to say that he got it from Shelley. Certainly not. But for those of us who are grown up with reading more English poetry than Indian writing in English, maybe Shelley would come to our mind. So the poem by Derozio is called Aspirations. What do you aspire for? If I ask you, my dear students, I'm sure you have your dreams, your hopes, your aspirations. You want to do this, you want to do that, and you must. Because remember, you have to dream, you have to aspire. You should not stop dreaming, thinking that it will never come true. And I can't help but quote one of our great presidents, Abdul Kalam, who said, and he said it in Hindi, I'll translate it for you into English. Dreams are not what you dream after you go to bed. Dreams are those which do not let you go to bed, which do not let you sleep. So don't be scared to aspire, to dream, to hope. And then, of course, we will walk that path. It's very important. So what are Derozio's aspirations? Our hopes are like young birds, and where they fly we know not. But alas, they soar too far, and then with broken pinions fall to earth. There is that little bit of sorrow a little bit of pessimism creeping into it. But please remember, we are at the beginning of the 19th century, right? We are in the 1800s, the beginning of the 19th century, when the situation for our country was not. Our hopes are like young birds, and where they fly we know not. So hopes can fly. They don't need wings. They don't have no law of gravity. Your dreams, your aspirations. But alas, they soar too far, and then with broken pinions, their wings, like the story of Icarus. I'm not sure if you know. We have it in Indian mythology also, that when you went too near the sun, the wings, got burnt and you fell down. So that danger is there. So we say, keep your head up in the air, but make sure your feet are on the ground. So somewhere that combination, my dear students, of idealism should be somehow linked to practical realism or pragmatism. So, I would I were a ray of light to play upon the wave with the spirits of the water and the ocean's lovely daughter, or down to dart with the arrowy flight to the mermaid's coral cave. So let's first begin with the rays of the sun falling on the wave. I'm sure you've seen that sight. What a beautiful sight. I even love the rays of the sun coming in through the window, where you can see the dust particles. There's dust all around us, but where the ray of the sun falls in, you can see the dust particles, and they seem to be what? Playing, dancing, flying. It all depends on your imagination. So I want to be a ray of light to play upon the wave with the spirits of the water and the ocean's lovely daughter. Again, in all our mythologies, right, we have the sun god, of course, but you also have the sea god, you have the wind god, you have the fire god. Indian mythology is full of it. And therefore, with the spirits of the water and the ocean's lovely daughter, or down to dart with arrowy flight to the mermaid's coral cave. Remember the mermaid, half girl, half fish, right? The lower part of the body is a fish and the upper part real, imagined, or maybe did exist in mythological times. Beautiful verse, but also notice how the rhyme scheme works. Light rhymes with flight, wave with cave, water with daughter. So very quickly, if you remember the study of your rhyme scheme, light would be A, wave would be B, water would be C. How does it work? A, B, C, D, E. So A rhymes with E, B rhymes with F, and C, D. A little difficult, but if you put it down, it becomes clear. Light and flight, wave and cave, water and daughter. So you've got A, B, C, C, A, B. I hope I'm making sense, right? Put it down, write it down, and it will become very clear. I would I were a dream to glide into a poet's brain, that he might tell of worlds unseen, and flowers and stars that never have been, and mark the flow of pleasure's tide, and sapphire skies serene. Beautiful color imagery, beautiful imagery. Now he's become a dream. Remember, he was a ray of light. Now he's become a dream. A dream can glide. Where do your dreams come from? Have you asked? Do they walk into? Do they fly into? Do they run into? How do they enter our heads? That too when we are fast asleep in the comfort of our bed. So, I'll become a dream and I'll glide into a poet's brain. And then the poet's imagination. What does the poet write about? That he might tell of worlds unseen. Worlds that you and I have not seen because it's of the imagination. And flowers and stars that never have been. Nowadays we talk about fantasy. I'm sure you watch so many serials of fantasy on the TV. So it could be fantasy. We called it science fiction earlier. It could be that. So flowers and stars and worlds which have not been seen, and mark the flow of pleasure's tide. The coming and going of pleasure, because life is never a bed of roses. So if you have roses, you have to have thorns. And sapphire skies serene. When you look up at the sky and you look at the changing colors of the sky, right? Depending on what part of the day it is, what part of the year it is, whether there are clouds, whether there is pollution, etc., etc. But here it is sapphire. Sapphire is a deep blue. So maybe it's evening time. I would I were a mellow tone of a young lover's lute, that zephyr me might onward bear and pour me gently in the ear of some beloved and lovely one, her soft heart to salute. Poetry cannot move away from love. Love is so much an intrinsic part of any poetry. So here, Derozio goes into, I wish I could become the tone, the music, the tune. Where? On the lute. The flute, right? You know a lot of modern musical instruments. You know the violin maybe, you know the veena, you know the sitar, you know the bongo, etc., etc. But there are certain earlier musical instruments that you might have come across in your English poetry, like the harp or the lyre or the lute. So he wants to get into the lute, play that romantic tune, and then be carried by the zephyr. Zephyr is a mild breeze, not a stormy wind, but a mild breeze. And where will it go? The song will be carried gently into the ear of some beloved and lovely one. My dear students, you need a lot of imagination to move with Derozio into this verse. What's happening? Right? A mellow tone which comes out of the lute, right, of this lover. The wind will carry it softly into the ear of the beloved. All right? And then her soft heart. The heart will be softened by the beautiful song. And where is it coming from? And think of all the lovers that you have read of, that you have seen in movies, right? And then her soft heart to salute. I would I were a starry gem upon the brow of night, that lovers' eyes might turn to me to witness all their ecstasy. How blessed I'd be in blessing them, though with a trembling light. Imagination, all the sounds, all that your senses do for you. So now he becomes a starry gem. You know, the twinkling stars, when you look up at the sky, if you stay in a crowded city with too much of artificial light, we can't see it at all. But if you go out into the open, into the village or into the forest, the stars twinkling. 10,000 saw I at a glance, where Wordsworth says of the daffodils. I'm talking about that twinkle like stars, he says further. So then he wants to be a starry gem upon the brow of night. So it's night time. That lovers' eyes might turn to me to witness all their ecstasy. How blessed I'd be in blessing them, though with a trembling light. Because, the stars, they twinkle. The light is not continuous. So now I wish I could be. My dear students, without imagination, you cannot appreciate any poem. The last verse talks about, I would I were the hope that fires a youthful minstrel's breast, while to his lady's ear he brings strains such as a seraph sings. Oh, there, if ever hope expires, it sweetly sings to rest. Then he talks about being a poet who is singing beautiful songs, and because the hope there should not ever expire. There should not be an end to that hope. So, where will his beautiful love song end? In the heart, through the ear of his beloved. That is where he thinks it should finally rest. So, in this poem too, we have one description after the other, in a monologue, his aspirations, what he wants to be, what he wants to do. We move on from a purely patriotic poem to a poem which is a love poem, which is a poem with I at the center. But what do I want to do? What do I want to be? That's how Derozio's poem talks about what he would want to do, what he aspires to be. Read the poem again, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it more.